Hi Year 13. Here is a little video. It's only going to be a quick one on dramatic conventions, what some of those conventions are versus, if we're studying prose or poetry, just picking out those specific dramatic conventions and being able to break them down and add meaning to them as well, so we're not just feature spotting. Again, here is our trusty criterion, descriptors. So we're going to be focusing on analysis and evaluation, just making sure that when we're aiming for these boxes 4 and 5, textual features and authorial choices are used, and there's a good evaluation of how these features shape meaning. So as I've said, dramatic conventions, when you are looking at a drama piece, it should never be to the detriment of looking at some of our literary conventions too. They will still be in there. It is still okay to look at those literary conventions, but it will be good to look at the specific dramatic conventions too. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the conventions then. So stage directions, narrator. Okay, really simplistic, but referring to stage directions is going to be quite significant when you are studying a drama extract or responding to an unseen extract in drama. Now, the reason that I've put / narrator here is because a couple of reasons. In some stage productions, in some plays, you can have a physical narrator on stage. That does happen in some plays. In other plays, we don't have any narrator on stage, and the stage directions can act as the narrator. Now, with some playwrights, such as Tennessee Williams, for example, the use of stage directions act as the narrative voice. When they are very poetic, when they are very expressive and very specific, the stage directions can act as the narrative voice as well, in the absence of that narrator being on stage. It isn't just stage directions that can act as the narrative voice, but this is why I've grouped the both of them together. What are the stage directions telling us that maybe the characters, aren't conveying quite explicitly? So do be considering the breakdown of those stage directions as well. Consider, are the stage directions poetic? Are they prosaic? What does that mean? We've got some playwrights who have very lengthy stage directions, which really set the scene, and some that are quite brief. Why is that? What does the playwright want us to focus on more so? And then I've included the Freytag triangle. So the Freytag triangle is just the rise in tension and resolution within a scene. Again, I'm going to be referring to Tennessee Williams a lot within this video, just because he is, he's a great playwright for one, but also he does exhibit in his plays a lot of these dramatic conventions. So the Freytag triangle, you can get a rising and falling action within a scene. So this can be classed as a structural feature as well. Is there a rising of tension in the extract that you look at? Do we see that structural development? Is there more of a resolution? You're not going to get a whole scene as an extract, but you will get part of it. So do be thinking about, is there any development of tension within the scene? And that is a structural feature as well, this rise in tension. And then we've got dialogue, and I've put monologues there. I've put dialogue and monologues. So think when you are looking at the dialogue of the characters themselves. I've said this before in my previous video, but does one character have more dialogue than the other? That can be a structural feature too. Is one character dominating quite literally in the amount of dialogue that they have? Is there a character alone on stage? Are they speaking in monologues? This can all be analysed as part of a dramatic convention, structural features, and linguistic features too, because you still need to break down the diction within the dialogue. You still need to be looking at, okay, well, how is this character speaking to the others around them? Yeah, it's not particularly high level to be talking about imperatives or other sentence structures, exclamatories, declaratives. But if you're linking that back to the characterization and looking specifically at dialogue, and then you're bringing in stage directions and things of that nature, you are going to develop a sophisticated argument. Then I've put gesture as well. So gesture is the physical movement, so it can be facial expressions, it can be the movement of the limbs, for example, gesture. So what kinds of gestures are the characters making? Does that add to their characterization? Does it show feelings that they're experiencing that they might not be voicing through their dialogue? Does their gesture juxtapose their dialogue? What might you say about those things? And now the next thing I've looked at is blocking, which is obviously a little bit different to gesture. It is still movement, but it's the movement of the characters around the stage, and pay particular attention to the exits and entrances of characters in an extract. It's always going to be significant. It's always going to tell you something. For example, even though it's an IGCSE text, an inspector calls is a great example of why exits and entrances can be significant within a play. Things change with the exit, with the entrance rather, of the inspector, and characters coming in and out. It's extremely important to consider this, but do refer to it as the blocking traces, and be looking at these exits and entrances too. So what I've put in here next is the mise en scene, so lighting, the set, props, and music. Now with lighting, I've put shadows too. If there's any expression of shadows on stage, that can obviously still be classed as lighting. This all creates, because we don't necessarily always have a narrator on stage, this can create that narrative voice that we would get in a prose piece. You know, a narrator within a prose piece would explain this to us. We don't have that, so it can come through the mise en scene, through the lighting, the shadows, the set, the props, and the music. So these are just some of the conventions that we will have gone over last year, and just some of the things that I want you to be really looking for when you are looking for dramatic conventions. Quite easy to manage. It's not too difficult to manage this. It's just going to be remembering to also include those literary features as well, and always be coming up with the ideas of how this links back to your main argument, so we're not just feature spotting. So I love Streetcar Named Desire. I love Tennessee Williams. It's an amazing play, and he's an amazing playwright to study because it's so rich in these dramatic conventions. But this is a relatively small piece of the text, and it's just after it's Blanche's descent into madness, just after Stanley has raped her. Sorry if there's any spoilers in that and you've not read the play before. I do apologise. But yeah, so the reason I picked this is because this is really quite a small piece of text, and it is stage directions, but there's a lot of dramatic conventions even just within these stage directions. So what I thought I'd do is talk you through this, break it down, and then break it down into what might we say about these things. Obviously I've got a working knowledge of the whole text, but we can look at these just in isolation. So if we look at it, she rushes past him into the bedroom. Lurid reflections appear on the walls in odd, sinuous shapes. The Varsuviana is filtered into a weird distortion, accompanied by the cries and noises of the jungle. Blanche seizes the back of a chair as if to defend herself. So we've got really detailed and specific stage directions describing quite literally the actions of Blanche. We've got physical movement. It's erratic, and it demonstrates her nervousness and descent into madness. Now, even within these stage directions, before we get on to any dramatic conventions, you can be looking at the diction and stuff within there. We've got, you know, it's low-level diction traces, but in terms of terminology, but we've got rushes, seizes. These all give us an understanding of the frame of mind and state of play that is going on for Blanche at the moment. That's before we even get into looking at how dramatic conventions in particular are used. You know, she's seizing the back of the chair as if to defend herself. She's rushing past people. She's in a state of panic. And so these stage directions very clearly characterize her in this moment. However, when we start to look at the mise-en-scene and how lighting is used here, we've got lurid reflections appear on the walls in odd, sinuous shapes. Now, obviously, I know that Tennessee Williams uses lighting quite a lot throughout Streetcar Named Desire, but even just looking at this part, lurid reflections on the walls, you can look at the diction of that as well. Lurid, that's really, really powerful diction, and this lighting is used to show how her madness is like literally closing in on her. There's reflections all over the walls, and they're symbolic of her demented state of mind. And if you combine that with her actions within the stage directions, she's running around and there's these lurid reflections on the walls. Lighting is used there to prop up the theme of madness, but also to further characterize her descent into madness here. And then we've got Varsuviana and the sounds and cries and noises for the jungle. So music is used almost as a narrative voice in Streetcar Named Desire, but you wouldn't know that in one simple extract. But what you could say is that the music and sounds are additionally utilised to add to this attack of the senses, and this is overwhelming Blanche. Also think about this, if you were a member of the audience, you know, if you were sat in a theatre, for example, it would be very dark in the theatre. How would this look? We've got these lurid reflections, we've got music in a weird distortion, we've got cries and noises from the sound of the jungle. We as the audience are experiencing this madness with Blanche. We assume nobody else on stage is, or the characters that are on stage with her are feeling this way too. But if we were sat in that audience, we would have an attack on our senses in the same way that she does. So we've got the use of mise-en-scene here with the physical movement and gestures of Blanche on the stage, and this adds to the overall meaning and menacing descent into madness that she experiences within this scene. So if I were to sum this up, I would say that I would really focus on the diction of the stage directions. Even if we look at the, the structural sentences as well, the declaratives, we've got these very firm. It reflects that erratic nature and state of mind that she's in. Then we've got this, the use of the dramatic convention of the lighting, the sounds, and all of these things add to this attack of the senses that she is experiencing, and reflecting back on that theme that we've been talking about in terms of, or that I've been talking about in terms of looking at madness. Now let's go back to the one, the death of a salesman. So we looked at this in class the other day. Obviously, if you watch this and you're not in my class, you'll still be able to get the gist of what it is I'm talking about. So looking at the stage directions here, I've done the same thing here. So the knocking is heard again. He takes a few steps away from her and she vanishes into the wing. The lights follow him. And now he's facing young Biff, who carries a suitcase. Biff steps towards him. The music is gone. Again, if we look at the structure of this almost reflects sort of the panic of, right, we need to get this woman out of the way, need to assume normality so that Biff can come into the room. And we've got these short sets. It's not particularly poetic, it's pretty straightforward, right to the point. But we have sound used again. So sound doesn't always have to be music in the mise-en-scene. Sound can be used in a variety of different ways. So we've got the knocking used. So this is going to clearly disturb the situation between the man and the woman that's on stage. Initially it's the knocking, but then once she is gone and the character of Biff enters, the music also goes as well. And this would actually change the atmosphere of the scene entirely, and it reflects the theme of deception. If the music is gone, along with the disappearance of the woman, then the entire atmosphere and environment has changed upon the entrance of Biff. And that is something that we start to see. Obviously, we've read the whole extract, but that's something that you start to see the further on that you go. He takes a few steps away from her. She vanishes into the wing. The light follows him. So looking at the diction here, we've got the use of light, and the light follows him. So the fact that it follows him is symbolic that we know he's the character Willie, and it demonstrates that he's going to be the one in control. And this can then be viewed as a reflection of the manipulation that we see later on in the scene. The light following him gives him a sense of power. The light isn't just on the stage, it's specifically following him. And think about these things and think about his characterization. He's characterized as quite manipulative. He's a liar. He's deceitful. He's got this informal relationship with his son within this sort of extract that we're looking at. So this is how you might analyze the idea of lighting and sounds and music. And then I wanted to look at the blocking of this and the exits and entrances, because this is where we see exits and entrances of characters being really significant. It's quite evident to us that all three of these people are unable to be in the same room at one time. And there's a power dynamic already established, because then Biff is the only person out of all three characters who doesn't know this. And his entrance results in the exit of the woman, and this highlights the deception. This also creates a little bit of dramatic irony, because we as the audience know, because we've seen her physical exit, we know that she's there. Willie knows that she's there, but Biff doesn't know that she's there. So we're getting a little bit of dramatic irony in there too. And these are just some ways that these conventions can be used, and some ways that you can add meaning to them. It's no different to trying to add the meaning to our prose texts or poetry. I think it's just reminding yourself again of what these things are. I hope that helps a little bit, and we can chat tomorrow in class about it.